I'm feeling this thing. I'm feeling anxiety. I'm feeling panicky. I'm feeling a rush of energy and it's really uncomfortable. I'm feeling really irritable. Just kind of accept this is part of my body's response to a situation. I don't need to fight it. I don't need to argue with myself over it. I don't need to shame or blame myself for it.
Have you ever felt like your mind just won't stop? The racing thoughts at night, the worry that never seems to end. Maybe you've told yourself, this is just stress. I should be able to handle it. The thing is, when menopause shows up, anxiety often feels different, louder, heavier, and it's not something you can simply push through. In this episode, we're breaking down why anxiety takes such a toll during menopause and how to interrupt that spiral so that you could finally breathe easier. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button to get more episodes of the Menopause Anxiety Project. Gina, thank you so much for joining me again here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me back. I'm excited to see where our conversation goes today.
Well, back in 2009, and that feels like ages ago, I had started an online community called Menopause ChitChat. And there were over 10,000 women who had joined to share their stories. And I thought we'd be talking about hot flashes, weight gain, but I was completely wrong. The number one topic that came up in the community all the time was anxiety. And women use the term, but they also use different ways of describing it. It was, panic and worry, anger, and even depression. So today I really wanted to talk about why you think anxiety shows up in so many different forms, especially for women in menopause. And is that something you've seen even in your own practice?
Definitely, yes. And anxiety is sometimes a physiological condition where we're feeling the rapid heart rate, right? So when we physiologically get a hot flash, our heart rate will accelerate. And then our brain has to interpret what's happening. Why am I feeling this surge? So then sometimes our brain will we try to explain what our sensations are to ourselves, right? And so there is a physiological component to anxiety in menopause, especially if you're noticing the anxiety coming up when you are not really in a stressful situation particularly, and all of a sudden you'll just feel this surge of feelings and maybe a little bit panicky. So sometimes when that happens, that's sort of a bottom-up or physiological change that then our brain has to process and go, what's happening to me? What's happening to me? And then we give it some meaning. So if we can tell ourselves, oh, that's the anxiety that comes from the physical changes. What can I do to apply some comfort to myself? We're less likely to engage in this internal battle that fuels anxiety. Psychological anxiety is often an internal conflict. I should be exercising, but my kid needs me to, pick up some things at Target for them for their school project, or I should be doing this and I'm not, or what questioning, why am I feeling so angry and irritable? I shouldn't be feeling that. I have to stop feeling that. And so we'll have these internal arguments with ourselves, and that's more of the psychological process that fuels anxiety. One of the first things to do is stop and accept it. I'm feeling this thing and name it, I'm feeling anxiety. I'm feeling panicky. I'm feeling a rush of energy and it's really uncomfortable. I'm feeling really irritable. And just kind of accept, okay, this is part of my body's response to a situation. I don't need to fight it. I don't need to argue with myself over it. I don't need to shame or blame myself for it. I just need to figure out how to give myself some comfort right now, how to listen to this. So if it's kind of a really restless Like I noticed one of the worst symptoms I had in menopause was right before bed, like 11 o'clock at night when I usually would want to be going to bed. I'd get a surge of just adrenaline energy and irritability. And I just felt all this energy like I was going to be up all night. It was that kind of a feeling. And so I cultivated these practices of like, okay, your body is needing some movement at 11 o'clock at night, maybe some gentle stretches, doing yoga nidra, which is just listening to one of these online yoga nidra things, which really works well on anxiety. It's like a laying flat on your back kind of yoga thing where you do deep breathing and you just listen to the voice. You can find those for free online, yoga nidra exercises. But I would do some of those things, real gentle things, and try to calm myself down, physiological stresses. So I think that the first thing is accepting it and not interpreting it as a really bad thing right away. It's like we can go, okay, part of menopause is my heart rate's going to speed up. I'm going to get a rush of adrenaline. I'm going to get irritability along with it. I'm going to be hot, sweaty. I'm going to have these feelings and they're going to come at random and I won't know when they're coming. Let me just accept that and not interpret that as like a really bad, I'm going crazy, I'm losing myself, I'm never going to be the same again. All of those interpretations that we have of those sensations can just amplify the anxiety and make us feel really out of control.
You talk about how anxiety, anger, and stress are linked. Why do you
Yes.
think it's important for us to understand that connection?
Because I think a lot of times what we see with a lot of anxiety, people who are operating with a lot of nervousness, anticipating things going badly, imagining the worst case scenario, imagining things going badly in their lives and then feeling the sensations as if it were happening now, that kind of anxiety. Often underneath that, if somebody is presenting as kind of more anxious and fearful in terms of their personality, their outward expression is a little more nervous, hesitant, avoidant, avoiding confrontation, avoiding difficult conversations. If that's what we're seeing, underneath that is often a lot of anger. There's often resentment. I'm doing all the work, I'm doing all the labor, nobody's helping me. Or, I'm resenting this particular situation in my life and I'm afraid to express myself. I'm afraid to express that. So that inner conflict, if I'm mad about something, but I can't do anything about it because, bad things will happen if I do. That internal conflict fuels anxiety. Now we see the opposite go with the typical hothead personality that has no problem expressing their anger out loud. And often underneath that is internal anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of feelings of shame, internal struggle. But what we're seeing on the outside is anger. Anger and anxiety are linked psychologically and physiologically. So then external stressors, like, the car breaks down, the plumbing blows up, your kid gets sick, there's a crisis in the neighborhood, there's a fire. Those external stressors then just amplify the anxiety and anger. So anger, anxiety, and stress, I think of this like three-headed, triangle monster. And so we can tackle it from all of those ends. There are certain external stressors we can manage. We may not be able to stop the wildfires going through the neighborhood or the flood, but we can cope with maybe a temporary problem with our car or, with something going on. So if we're already in a heightened state of vulnerability, and menopause can make us feel quite vulnerable, then we may not be managing as well as we could. So I think that's where we need to look at increasing our stress and anxiety management on a daily basis so that we're kind of lowering our baseline level of arousal, nervous system arousal, that then makes it really hard to manage and maintain if something triggers, like an external stressor triggers an increase in our suffering, in our feelings of distress. So I think tackling all of those at once, it's good to just start with the body and trying to provide some soothing for physical sensations that we're going through, and then try to minimize how our interpretation of that this is normal, this is okay that you're feeling this way. You can provide yourself some comfort. This feeling will pass. If we're interpreting it that way in our brain, we can lower the temperature a bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. There was something that you said in your book, and I have a copy of it right here. I've also beat it up a little bit. So in your book, you wrote, and I thought this was really interesting, about the danger of asking, why am I anxious? Because it keeps us stuck with the problem. And instead, you suggest saying, how can I feel calmer? Why is
Exactly.
that shift so powerful?
Well, it's really interesting if you think about it. If we hear our car making a funny noise, it is important to ask, why is my car making this funny noise? Is there something wrong? And where is that noise coming from? So the why question might help us fix the car. The problem with psychological distress is when we ask ourselves, why am I feeling this? If we don't have an obvious thing happening right now, like I'm distressed because there's a fire in my neighborhood, if there's nothing obvious there, then what we're going to be doing is opening this file cabinet drawer in our brain that says all the reasons why I need to be anxious and distressed and angry and upset. And so we'll just go through the memories. I'm anxious because my parents were alcoholics. I'm anxious because my husband yelled at me last week. I'm anxious because my kids need extra help in school. And so we'll just dig that hole deeper of just let's think about every possible thing that could possibly make me feel bad, all the way back into my past. And then also in my imaginary future, there's a whole slew of things I can imagine in my future that will explain why I'm anxious. So all that does is amplify our anxiety. It really doesn't fix the car. So we have to just take that analogy of the car, set it aside, and go for a human being to feel better. If our goal is to feel better, it's best to go straight to what would help me feel better right now in this moment.
Yeah.
So we don't have to figure the whole rest of our life out, and we don't have to solve all the problems from the past. We just go, what would make me feel better right now? So in my example of getting revved up at 11 o'clock at night, what would help me feel better would be doing some gentle stretches, to be doing a little bit of movement to get some of the restlessness out of my body, but not too much movement because I really don't want to be up all night. So I would do some of those yoga things, some meditation, to treat the immediate feeling of being aroused at an inopportune time, which was just purely coming from a physical menopause symptom. So the best thing to do is to provide some soothing for yourself in that moment. So what would soothe me in this moment right now? It's not going to be having the whole house cleaned and the garage cleaned and the closet organized and the kids all dressed, and none of those things outside of you are really going to deal with the physiological arousal that you're experiencing in the moment. So if we can immediately say what would help me feel better right now, it might be that you're thirsty and hungry. It might be that you need to sit down. You've been standing up for a long time, or you need to stand up and do some movement because you've been sitting for a long time. So asking yourself what could help me feel better right now in this moment, you start taking control then of your symptoms, and that's the fastest way to feel better.
I am guilty of opening that file cabinet, and probably at the worst possible times. When you said that, I can picture myself pulling that open and be like, okay, let's go through the laundry list. But also, it's the trying to anticipate all the things that could possibly go wrong. How do you get off that hamster wheel of worry?
Yes, and we've heard it said that worry is a waste of imagination, right? It's our own imagination generating uncomfortable physical sensations. So I do an example with my clients where I ask them to imagine that they're walking in a citrus field and they're starting to get, it's a nice warm day, and they're starting to get tired and thirsty, and they reach up into a tree and they pull out a lemon, and you pull out this lemon and it's really nice and plump, and you put your finger in the peel, your thumb in the peel, and you start peeling it away, and it kind of squirts you in the eye a little bit, and it stings. And then you peel out, part of the lemon, and you start to peel it apart, and you put a piece in your mouth, and you imagine yourself chewing on that lemon. And most people, when they do this exercise, they'll notice that their mouth is salivating.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is right now, just thinking about it. So if you really think about something a lot, your brain will produce the physiological reaction as if it were really happening. So that's a lot of power, though. And we don't need to just kind of go along for the ride that our anxiety wants to take us on. We can choose to be on a different ride or see a different movie, for example, right? So when I notice that my mind is going into the what if scenarios of worst case scenarios in the future and what might be bad, and I'm starting to feel those feelings, I have an exercise that I call the compelling fantasy, and I recommend that everybody has one or two of these. And what it is it's something that you can think about that requires a lot of details to think about. It's more it's complex. It's not just I'm laying on the beach, looking at the ocean. There's not enough in that fantasy to keep your mind busy. And when we're anxious, we're busy. Our brain is like overthinking. So we want to give it something else to think about that produces different physiological sensations. So hopefully a feeling of mild joy or contentment. So a compelling fantasy would be something like you win the $100 million lottery and you get to figure out what you're going to do with that. What lawyer are you going to hire? What are you going to do after you pay the taxes? Are you going to open up a charity? Are you going to, go on a world travel trip? Who would you take on that travel trip with you? What would you do after you spent all the money you wanted to spend? So you would be thinking in limitless, expansive ways of things that might bring you some pleasure. And so the goal is to think about what would bring you pleasure. I play guitar, so sometimes I might think about one of my compelling fantasies is imagining that I get to pick the perfect band and I get to play with the Rock Bottom Remainders, which is a band consisting of Stephen King and all these awesome authors. And I get to play bass guitar with the Rock Bottom Remainders and sing, old rock and roll songs. And so I get to imagine what the set list would be, what I would play, how I would play it, what would the banter be backstage, what venues would we perform in. So it gives your mind a lot of really fun, creative things to think about. And then what are you not doing? You're not obsessing about a future. And when you can train your brain to come up with one or two compelling fantasies that are just delightful to think about. I know people who are quilters and they love imagining like quilt patterns and thinking about the fabrics that they would use and who they would give it to and how they would design it and what types of stitches they would use, or designing your dream home or your ideal vacation fantasy.
So really getting into those details, though.
And the details are important because our brain, when you look at a PET scan of somebody under the influence of anxiety, there's this big ball of fire right behind the forehead. It just looks like a big ball of fire. So what it means is our brain is literally overthinking. It's like you're in your car and you've got your foot on the gas and your foot on the brake. And you're just burning a lot of energy. You're just burning a lot of energy, but you're not going anywhere. You're not getting anything accomplished because you're just spinning, you know. So the compelling fantasy starts to create a little bit of delight. And as soon as we can feel a little bit of delight, we relax. You know, we feel a little bit safer. We can think more creatively. It's also really helpful for emotional and mental flexibility and creativity if we can exercise that fantasy part of our mind that delights us. A fantasy that delights us versus a fantasy that makes us feel bad. And we all have the power to do that. If you have, most of the people I know who have anxiety are just super delightful, lovely humans with creativity and a lot of interpersonal sensitivity and all of that. It's just there's a lot of self-torture that goes on when the anxiety takes over. So you want to be able to use that beautiful imagination and sensitivity in a way to delight yourself. And so I would suggest having one or two of those that you can reliably think about. You're in rush hour traffic. You're in an uncomfortable situation. Just start daydreaming about the quilt you're going to design, or, you know, the closet organizer that if you're an organizer and you love organizing things, just organize to your heart's content if it's making you feel good to think about, you know, all the new fancy little boxes you're going to get for your closet.
There was the one thing that you've mentioned too in reading the book was toxic self-criticism.
Yes.
I think we could get pretty good at that. You start thinking, I should be able to handle this. I should be stronger or smarter or wiser, whatever the case may be. Why do we do that to ourselves?
Well, I think a better question than why would be, how can we stop criticizing ourselves in that harsh way? And I think what makes criticism toxic is when it deflates us, discourages us, diminishes us, and demotivates us. Healthy criticism is like in my writing, read, and critique group. I'll share my writing with the group, and they'll tell me what's working and what isn't, and they'll criticize my writing. And sometimes it stings because I'm emotionally invested in wanting it to be good. So I might feel stung a little bit, but I feel so good that I know a good direction to go into to fix that, to fix the writing and make it better. So it's constructive. It's criticism not of me personally or telling me that I'm a worthless, no good for nothing. It's criticism in the service of something I want to accomplish, right? So when people are criticizing us in a constructive way, it still might sting, but it doesn't deflate us to the point where we just feel like giving up, right? Mm-hmm. So toxic criticism, again, if you ask the why question, you're going to go back into all the reasons why you do this behavior you don't want to do, and it's not productive. A better question is the how can I question. How can I think about and talk about myself to myself in a way that is uplifting, encouraging, and not making me feel bad about myself,
Because it's not a bad thing to want to improve something, improve ourselves, improve the direction, improve your writing.
Yeah, all progress requires some degree of criticism, right? And I think what makes something toxic is if it's sort of across the board and hostile, and it's like talking about ourselves in absolutes, like I'm a loser, or I'm stupid, or I'm such an idiot, instead of saying I made a mistake. Oops, how could I have left that comma out? It really is not working. But instead I could say, well, I just don't know how to do commas. So if I don't know how to place commas in the proper place, then how could I possibly be a writer? And why am I fooling myself to think that I could ever accomplish anything like that? Because I have a serious comma problem, So I think toxic self-criticism, we know it's toxic when it stops our motivation and it makes us feel sapped of energy And here's the other thing. Anytime you are putting a label on yourself or someone else, you're distorting reality. You're reducing a whole human soul with a back history and potential and a family and spirit and everything. You're reducing that person, including yourself, to this label. You're an idiot, you're stupid, worthless, clumsy. And it's not true. And what we know about labels is they are by nature reductionistic, and if we attach to that label as if it were true, then we just close all the doors for everything else that's possible that we already know about ourselves, right? So no matter how smart a person is, they might do something. They're not going to be smart in everything, and they might do something that is stupid, right? But that doesn't mean the person is stupid. It means the particular behavior was not well thought out, not very well considered. So when we're talking to ourselves in that demeaning way, we're distorting reality. And I like to be in reality. And reality is, in this moment, I might not feel very good about what I did or what I said or where I am in my life. I might not like where I am in my life, right? And that sometimes we have to take a good, cold, hard look at our life and go, I don't have enough money saved, or I don't have, my kids are not doing well. I haven't been giving them enough attention, or my garage is a mess, or whatever. So we can take a good, hard look at ourselves critically without saying, and that means that I'm a failure, and that means that this is who I am for the rest of my life, and this is all who I've always been, and now, we're doomed. So I think sometimes the self-criticism it's better to make it specific and with a goal attached to it.
Okay.
Like, I wish I had more money saved. Okay, what do? Let's have a plan to save more money.
So taking action.
Having a goal, taking action towards the goal, and saying encouraging things to yourself. Like, if you can define a problem and you can define a solution for that problem, you can take action and improve things. If you're beating yourself up, you're weakening yourself, and you're less likely to do the very thing that you need to be doing in that moment.
Mm-hmm. And I found that when I have a big problem and there's a lot of worry or anxiety attached to it, and I'm going to simplify it here, but maybe it's cleaning the house. You feel like your whole house is just a mess, but you spend an hour and you get that kitchen shiny and cleaned and dishes are put away and you light that candle. There's a sense of relief. And you talked a little bit before, just you feel the temperature go down. It's making small improvements and small actions so that you're not stuck in this loop or this pattern of self-criticism or anxiety or worry.
Yeah, and I think that, if we get pleasure from things being neat and tidy and in their place, then that's a reasonable, good activity to do. I think where I would like to intervene with a lot of women, it's usually women, sometimes it's men, but is the idea that I can't be relaxed unless. I can't feel good about myself unless the kitchen's clean. I cannot relax unless fill in the blank. So that you're defining yourself, your possibilities for yourself in terms of whatever's happening out here around you. And what I recommend is, instead of saying that to yourself, because what that does is it hypnotizes you to think that messes equal anxiety, messes equal failure, messes equal being inadequate. And so you've just trained yourself to make that association every time. Well, guess what? Every day a mess is going to be made if you're living in your house every single day, right? So it doesn't need to be this battle that I'm now failing because, I messed up the kitchen again and again and again and again, right? So these are those kind of things that we begin to, we can override that with how we start with defining what's important and what isn't important. So what I tell people is, you can be relaxed while you're doing anything. You could be relaxed while you're picking up the dog poop in the backyard. You can be relaxed while you're cleaning the kitchen. You don't have to wait to have the kitchen clean to feel relaxed. You can be relaxed living your life, and messes can happen and you can still be relaxed. And things can break and you can still be relaxed. And you can screw something up or forget something and still be relaxed and cope with it. So I think that's an important possibility to have in your mind, rather than saying, I have to have this before I can have this. Because it's all made up by us. We make all that up. It's not intrinsically, I mean, there's plenty of people who are relaxed with mess.
True. Yes.
You know, it's not like it's inevitable that messes need to make us stressed out. We can clean and have things look nice and feel satisfied by that without feeling like that's necessary for us to be satisfied or
Right.
necessary.
It's just
for
something we
us.
placed on ourselves, this idea.
Exactly. And we can get enjoyment from it. I have a friend that's just amazing with the organization that she does, and she gets great pleasure in the doing of it. Great pleasure in the doing of it, you know? And so why not be able to enjoy doing that if that is important to you? But I think we don't need to tell ourselves it's a necessary ingredient for serenity to have things in place, or to have things in order.
You know, there's one thing that I really wanted to ask you, because in talking with women in the community and even friends and people that I've gotten to know over the years, it seems that you can live your whole life and never suffer a panic attack. And then you get to midlife, or you get to, you start going through menopause, and all of a sudden, panic attacks become your reality. Why? Well, okay, I can't ask why in this instance, because why do they start in midlife? Even if you've never had that happen to you before.
Well, I do think sometimes there are physiological causes for panic attacks. Menopause certainly can cause that surge. And then our brain is going, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And then it just ramps it all up. So I would go back to practices that soothe and comfort the self. Make sure you're doing regular things like eating plenty of fruits and vegetables, engaged in daily exercise, engaged in daily stress management, and then working on how you're thinking about those symptoms of panic and how you're thinking about that. It is true, as we get older, life gets more complex. If you've married and you've had children and you have more responsibilities, sometimes that can come with it a certain feeling of vulnerability, which can make anxiety flare up, and anxiety attacks flare up. They aren't inevitable, though, and they don't need to recur if you really address the nervous system arousal piece of it. And learn how to train your brain to calm itself down. I would, obviously see the doctor and look at what's going on health-wise. Are there any vitamin deficiencies? Are there some things that the doctor could help you with to block the panic attack? And then maybe work on the way you're interpreting the sensations. So that would be sort of, am I exaggerating this, the meaning of this panicky feeling? What is the panic trying to tell me? Is there something actually really wrong that's scary in my life that I need to address? If there's something really going on that you need to address, then you don't need the panic attack. You can just address that thing that's bothering you or that's, upsetting you. But sometimes these things can come up because we feel more vulnerable, and because we're going through hormonal changes, and because we have greater responsibilities. What I tell people about panic is just having that part of yourself, observing yourself. You've got the panicky part going, this is horrible, I'm feeling overwhelmed, am I going crazy? What am I doing? What is happening to my body? If you've had a full-blown panic attack, you might have a racing heart, you might feel lightheaded, you might have sweaty palms, you might feel pressure in your chest, you might feel like you're going crazy, like you can't breathe. So it feels overwhelming physically, right? So if you have some part of yourself looking at yourself going through that, And that part of yourself can say, oh, you're having a panic attack right now. Do some deep breathing through your nose and slow your breathing down right now. It will pass. You're going to be okay. This is temporary. And that observing part can take the panic attack, down a few notches. If that observing part is saying, holy crap, you're going crazy, or if you don't even have access to that part that's watching yourself, then you have to develop that part that's watching yourself. And so I think that's where therapy can be helpful, like cognitive behavioral therapy can really help, because it can teach you how to immediately manage a panic attack without feeling like you're going crazy.
I've heard from a lot of women when they feel they're made to think that it's all in their head. Maybe it's at home or it's at work, and you're trying to explain this to people that you love or are a part of your life, and you're like, I'm really going through something. And I think the worst thing that you could probably say to someone at that point in time is, oh my God, it's just all in your head. Just relax. That
Right.
just, I mean, I feel that just really makes a woman feel that she's not being heard. Like, you need some sympathy from the people around you or a little bit of acknowledgement. And when you're not getting that, how would you suggest the person deal with it?
I think that is exactly what happens when people are going through something that other people can't see. It's not like you have a broken leg and you're, up in the hospital and you look wounded, you know. And also other people haven't been through maybe a panic attack, or they haven't really been through a depression. And so they can't relate, right? I think the bigger, more important thing is, how do you give compassion to yourself? Because that's where the real skill comes in, because we can't make other people behave the way we would like them to behave. In any time, I mean, we can share with those other women who get it, and get some sympathy in those women's groups, which is another reason why I think what your work is. It's wonderful. You're doing an incredible service for women.
Thank you.
But it's similar to the housework thing. Is if we can help ourselves feel better without requiring other people to be understanding. It's what we're telling ourselves. You're not failing as a person if you're having a panic attack. You're not doing anything wrong if you're going through menopause and feeling really angry and irritable. I mean, I remember getting hot flashes in the gym, and having the big giant fan at the gym just blowing in my face, and I was just feeling furious out of the blue for no reason. And this woman on the treadmill next to me was like, yeah, give me that air, and she's going through the same thing. And both of us were just like, "Arr," and, we can laugh about it, right? Because we're both, going through it. However, if you're saying to yourself, it's okay, honey, you're going to get through this, and you're not doing anything wrong, and you're not failing, and you're feeling vulnerable right now, what would help you feel better? And how can you take care of yourself? And demand that for yourself without apology, and even sometimes without an explanation. You don't need to say, I'm going to go do an ice bath, I'm
Right.
putting ice in the bathtub to deal with my hot flash. You don't even have to explain that to anybody if that's what's going to help you feel better in that moment. I think it's helpful to ask. I've found that with persons of the male gender, really concrete asks like, honey, when I tell you I'm having a hot flash, this is specifically what I need you to do. Say,
That's
how
fair.
can I help you? How can I help you, honey? Can you just do that? If I say I'm having a hot flash, can you just say to me, how can I help you, honey? And then whenever I tell you to do, will you do that? It's very specific. Okay, can you get me a cold washcloth? Or can you leave me alone for a few minutes? So I do think with people who don't know what it feels like, sometimes giving them a really specific request is more manageable for someone to get their mind around. But if we're wanting them to bring us down off the cliff of our anxiety spiral, and they're not capable of doing that, they're not a therapist, they're not somebody who knows how to walk somebody off a panic attack, then that may not be the right place to go to get comfort. And you might want to have your own like meditation practice, or your own therapist, or your own process for doing that for yourself. And I can tell you, our resentment goes down enormously when we start taking better care of ourselves. We start giving ourselves permission to do what we need to do to feel better in the moment.
What you said before about giving the person a plan, something to do, I think can really help alleviate a lot of the stress in a relationship. Because when you don't have a broken arm, but your mind is racing and you're hot and you're sweaty and you're not feeling well, if you said, "Can I have a cold washcloth?" But if you leave that open to the person, how are they even supposed to know? If you don't know what's going to comfort you, how can you expect the other person to know what's going to comfort you?
And if we are just flailing around and we don't know how to comfort ourselves, we're going to just collect more resentment if we're expecting somebody else to figure it out for us. So that's where the empowerment really comes from, just checking in with yourself first. And I mean, I walked around with a cold washcloth pretty much, the whole time. And it's on my neck, and it's constantly, and it would heat up like in 2 seconds. And then if I was in a situation where I needed my husband to do something for me and I could give him a specific task, most loving husbands want to be able to please us, and they don't know how sometimes. So having that specific thing can reduce some of the family conflicts that occur during menopause. And also, I think sometimes if we can identify that the anger we're feeling, instead of interpreting it as, what's that drawer of all the things my husband has done through our whole marriage that's infuriated me? Is that the reason I'm angry now? So let me just let him have it with all the things over the last, 30 years. It's too overwhelming for a man to get his mind around that. And he's just going to look at you and just go, this is madness. You
Yes.
were really happy yesterday and you thought I was a great guy. Why do you think I'm the worst person in the world right now? But if we can identify it as that, this rage I'm feeling is out of proportion to anything specific happening right now in my life. So it's a menopause symptom. So maybe I just need to look at how do I soothe myself? I may need to take a run or do something physical to work out the restless, crazy energy I'm feeling. But if I'm taking care of myself first, what am I not doing? I'm not picking a fight with my husband. I'm not blaming him for not getting it or forgetting to take the trash out or whatever thing we can target as this is the reason why I'm so mad.
It is out of proportion, and I've been guilty of that many times. And when it's happening, like I know
We all
that
have. Yeah.
my feeling
We
is
all
way
have.
out of proportion to, spilled milk or not letting the dog out. You name it. It doesn't feel right, but it feels necessary at the time. Or like the only way I'm going to get out all of that energy and emotion is to pick on my poor husband.
Well, we all have done that. I mean, and it's not to say that men don't, overreact to things too for physiological reasons, physiological arousal, testosterone bursts, Men have their hormonal cycle too. I think most women, though, it's sort of shocking when you get to menopause, where you feel those surges that really do feel like they're just taking over your whole brain and body. And so we do need a lot of self-compassion and just really start with what do I need right now in this moment, and apply a lot of care for ourselves. And sometimes that may look weird to somebody else. I remember my friend was she was living outside of Toronto, Canada, when she was going through menopause, and there was this big, they had snow drifts covering the windows of the house, and she rolled down, the window and had a fan by the icy window in front of the snow. And it was like, negative 10 degrees outside. And she's blasted herself and she's still sweating, and she just was laughing. It's just like, I'm doing everything I can do to cool my body temperature down. And sometimes we just have to laugh. Yeah, I'm doing everything I can to try to provide myself some comfort in this moment. And it will pass.
Mm-hmm.
It will pass. And you're not failing. But I do think being able to quickly identify that it's something coming up physically, we don't need to go into all the reasons why we might be feeling mad in the moment, because we can always find them. You can
Yes.
always find 101 reasons to be mad about something, right?
About something. Yeah.
There's always something to be mad about or worried about, right? Or sad about. So we don't want to linger there. We don't want to linger there. We'd like to be able to move our mind towards things that provide a bit of delight, the peacefulness, and contentment.
If you were to talk to a woman right now who is listening, and you would want her to know, like you said, that this isn't going to last forever, but she feels like anxiety is just taking over her life. What is one small thing you would want her to do for herself when she wakes up tomorrow morning in order to feel better, safer, more compassionate towards herself?
I think the first thing I would say is to tell herself that it's possible for her to feel better and to learn ways to help herself feel better. So start with the idea that this is treatable and it works. And then I would say there's one simple breathing technique that has been known to reduce physiological anxiety arousal very quickly. And it's called the physiological sigh, or there's different names for it. But basically, you inhale as much as you can through your nose till you feel like you filled your lungs all the way up. And then you sniff again. So you do that, and then you breathe out through your mouth. So try it. Inhale through your nose as much as you can, and then sniff, and then out through your mouth.
Well, it feels silly, but at the same time, I think it's that extra sniff that is almost sort of awakens you to what is or isn't going on right now.
And what it does is it lowers your physiological arousal, lowers your heart rate, oxygenates your brain. And that was just doing one of those. Keep it going. It can, stop a panic attack. It can lower your anxiety. And it's easy, and it's a go anywhere thing. You can do it anywhere. At any
So it's
time.
little things. We don't need this big giant solution sometimes. It's just the little things.
Yep. Tell yourself it's possible to feel better and that you can learn how to do that. And then start with some breathing, that breathing technique. Breathing really helps because every time we slow our breathing down, we're telling our brain everything's okay. We can do the opposite too. We can start breathing really shallowly and hyperventilate. We can hyperventilate and we'll start creating a panic attack. Our heart rate will start racing. And then our brain might go, uh-oh, something bad is happening. This is really bad. So a lot of it starts with the breathing and slowing our breathing down, doing deep diaphragmatic breathing. And people think it's too easy. It can't be that easy, especially when you're feeling really, really terrible. You think it can't be that easy for me to feel better. But it is.
No, it is. But yes, I was thinking the exact same thing, that it seems so simple, but yet so effective. I'm going to point out the book again because I really loved it. I've recommended it to a lot of women in my life. And where can we find you or connect with you, or what are you working on now before we go?
Well, thank you. I have a Psychology Today blog. It's called Frazzle Brain. So you can look me up on Psychology Today. And my website is frazzlebrain.com, frazzlebrain, one word.com. And I have all my social media links. So I do have an Instagram and a Facebook, and I post articles and interesting psychology information on anxiety and anger and stress relief. And I also have a contact form there. So if anybody wants to ask questions, I'm happy to. I always get back to everyone. So I would love to connect with anyone if you have a question or a concern.
I'll make sure to mention that, because I'm sure we all have questions from time to time, and it would be great to be able to connect with you personally. So I just want to thank you so much for being here today, and I'm so grateful for the time we've spent.
Thank you, Holly. It's been a pleasure, and I always love our conversations. You are very good at this. You're very good at interviewing.
Thank you for joining us on the Menopause Anxiety Project. If anxiety has been part of your menopause journey, you don't have to go through it alone. Join the conversation at joinempart.com, where women are sharing real stories, real struggles, and real solutions for finding calm in the chaos. Until next time, remember, anxiety may be loud, but your strength is louder.